When people think of Green Lantern, they picture Hal Jordan. I mean, the guy was a stoic test pilot and cosmic cop. What do you expect? Some think of John Stewart, the tactical genius. And if you truly know ball, then you maybe picture Kyle Rayner if you grew up in the 90s. But almost no one thinks of good old Guy Gardner.
You're going to regret it.
That I'd like to see! One punch! One punch!
Now there's a reason Guy isn't our guy. To most people, he's the lantern nobody asked for, but everyone remembers. The one who got knocked out by Batman. The one who wore a yellow ring just to spite everyone. The Lantern, who led the Red Lantern Corps while vomiting blood acid on his enemies. And while that seems like a multiverse of choices, it's exactly why Guy Gardner might actually be the most interesting Green Lantern in the entire Corps. Don't believe me? Well then, these are 10 times the guy who was supposed to be the chosen one, who got passed over and even went dark, proved he was the most interesting Lantern to ever do it. Welcome to Heroscope. Make sure to hit like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, this one was weird. After one of his many career setbacks, Guy decided to open up Warriors, a superhero bar where costumes were required and superpowered bar fights were the entertainment. I kid you not, Guy had most heroes run charities in a place where Booster Gold could fight Blue Beetle over the tab while Fire and Ice took bets. And the crazy part? It worked. Warriors became the space where heroes could actually decompress after saving the world, where Superman could relax because everyone understood the weight. Guy somehow created something genuinely useful by leaning into exactly who he is. Aggressive, well-intentioned, and against all odds, somehow functional. But beyond that, the bar actually showcased Guy's overlooked people skills. The man remembered drinks, knew when someone needed to talk versus fight it out, and somehow maintained order among people who could level cities. In fact, when Lobo, the inane bounty hunter, tried starting trouble, Guy literally threw him out and banned him for a month. And guess what? Lobo came back, paid his tab, and behaved. Even the main man respected the warrior's sacred ground. But if you think that's crazy, let's look back at how he became a lantern, shall we? Here's what most fans don't know.
I'm traveling at maximum velocity. Tell Vantara
Vantara's dead.
Abinsur's ring found two equally worthy candidates, Hal Jordan and Guy Gardner. That's right, either one of them could have been the chosen one. But it's Guy we're talking about. When have things ever gone his way? See, the ring couldn't choose between them based on merit. And so Hal won because, get this, he was geographically closer to the crash site. That's it. Guy lost his destiny to real estate. And to make matters worse, it's not like the guy was on a road trip or something. No. Guy was legit teaching special education kids in Baltimore when the ring pinged him as worthy. He was a social worker dedicated to helping troubled youth nobody else wanted to teach. The universe quite literally said, "You're good enough," then picked the other guy because of proximity. In the end, Guy went back to teaching, carrying the weight of almost for years. Thankfully though, when Hal got injured and needed a replacement, the Guardians gave Guy a ring, even though again he was not the first choice, but rather the designated backup. Guy then proved himself, saved lives, and showed he belonged. And when it seemed like he was finally getting a break, he got hit by a bus. I'm not joking. Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, chosen by the universe, was taken out by public transportation. Everything changed after that. Getting hit by a bus sucks, but for Guy, it was so much worse. See, the bus accident gave Guy severe brain damage, so much so that it specifically affected his frontal lobe, the part handling impulse control, social awareness, and, get this, emotional regulation. Almost overnight, the patient teacher who worked with special needs kids was gone, and in his place was someone aggressive, confrontational, and arrogant beyond belief. DC basically created a character whose personality was shaped by traumatic brain injury, then made him the butt of jokes for decades. That's right, we watched a brain injury survivor struggle to fit into his dream role while everyone treated him like a punchline. And the crazy part is, it took years before DC addressed this with any depth. Getting hit by a bus sucks, but for Guy, it was so much worse. See, the bus accident gave Guy severe brain damage, so much so that it specifically affected his frontal lobe. The part handling impulse control, social awareness, and, get this, emotional regulation. Almost overnight, the patient teacher who worked with special needs kids was gone, and in his place was someone aggressive, confrontational, and arrogant beyond belief. Decades. That's right, we watched a brain injury survivor struggle to fit into his dream role, while everyone treated him like a punchline. And the crazy part is, it took years before DC addressed this with any depth.
Commandeered by the Green Lantern Corps to protect this planet against.
Back off, Guy.
All we knew was Guy challenged Superman to fights, hit on Wonder Woman aggressively, and showed up to Justice League meetings being deliberately obnoxious. But in reality, his worst impulses were no longer filtered. Everyone hated him for behavior directly caused by medical trauma. But the wildest part is even with brain damage, even with everyone hating him, even being treated as second-rate by everyone. Guy never quit. He showed up, did the job, and saved the world alongside heroes who barely tolerated him. One thing we know is, whatever the accident took, it definitely didn't touch his core willpower. Okay, as DC fans, we've talked about the moment. You know the one where Guy was challenging Batman's leadership, being especially aggressive, and then suddenly demanded they settle it physically. Batman warned him. Guy swung first. Bada boom, bada bang. Batman countered perfectly. Guy went down. The Justice League laughed. For years, this was the Guy Gardner moment. The punchline, literally. I mean, everyone cheered and moved on. But here's the darker part of the story. And yes, it has to do with Guy's traumatic brain injury. See, Batman, the world's greatest detective, absolutely knew this. I mean, he researched every League member's medical history and vulnerabilities. Batman knew exactly where to hit someone with frontal lobe damage to shut them down. So, not only was the fight not fair, but the team laughed at their brain-injured teammate getting knocked unconscious by someone who'd calculated how to exploit his condition. Sure, Guy was being insufferable. After all, he picked that fight. But there's something uncomfortable about watching heroes enjoy seeing their disabled teammate taken down. But what makes Guy unique is that even after this, even after being the literal punchline, he came back. He stayed on the team. He kept being a hero. Except for the time he got benched. Oh boy. See, here's one thing you have to know. Don't ever sub out Guy. I mean, ever. Why? Well, remember how Guy got his ring because Hal was sick? Well, the Guardians benched Guy after Hal returned. Now, for most people, that was the time to quit, hang up the suit, and, I don't know, enjoy retirement. Guy is not like most people. The man found Sinestro's yellow ring, you know, the anti-Green Lantern weapon powered by fear instead of will. Yep, found it and just kept being a hero anyway. Shocking everyone, he didn't turn evil. He even showed up to Justice League missions wearing yellow and green simultaneously, looking like a Christmas decoration designed by someone who failed color theory, and dared anyone to comment. The man basically said, "Oh, you don't want me in the Green Lantern Corps? Cool. I'll use your nemesis's power source and keep saving the world anyway." Do we have a problem? And no one had a problem because once again, it's Guy. But truth be told, this is peak Guy behavior. Hal would have brooded. John would have adapted diplomatically. Kyle would have been heartbroken, but understanding. Guy said bet and became the thing the Guardians feared most. A lantern they couldn't control, who was powerful and crazy enough to do whatever he wanted. Anyways, in the end, when Guy's physiology eventually rejected the yellow ring, the man took it a step further and discovered Vuldarian DNA in his body. And for those who don't know, Vuldarian DNA is basically alien genetics that gives him shape-shifting powers and super strength. Yeah, Guy was a menace. He became Guy Gardner Warrior with arm blades and hammer fists, maintaining his career through sheer refusal to quit. At this point, you can take away Guy's ring, his role, his respect, and his entire power set, and he'll still find another way to be a hero just to prove you couldn't stop him. Now, with how everyone describes him, you'd think Guy was dumb, and you would be sorely mistaken. Emphasis on the sore. See, one of the biggest misconceptions about Guy is that he's all rage and no brains. That's until you find out about the Daxamite incident. See, Daxamites are basically Kryptonians on steroids. Imagine all of Superman's powers, but more intense. Their only weakness is lead instead of kryptonite, and fighting one Daxamite is a Justice League level threat. Guy somehow ended up one-on-one with a Daxamite warrior. No backup, and he immediately recognized he couldn't win through power. The Daxamite could tank anything his ring could create. In a straight fight, Guy loses. So, Guy didn't fight straight. He created a lead construct, not a prison the Daxamite could break, not a weapon that wouldn't be fast enough. Guy created a cloud of microscopic lead particles around the Daxamite's head. Lead dust, which the alien had to breathe, that got in his eyes, that poisoned him from the inside faster than he could react. The Daxamite dropped in seconds. And just like that, with no showboating, no elaborate constructs, just You're too and weak to lead. Here's lead, good night. Guy basically beat a Superman-level villain. It's kind of weird that after this fight, the Justice League still didn't really respect him more. But don't be fooled. Guy might be smart, but his rage is a whole different category, especially when he got the Red Ring. Red Lanterns aren't heroes. In fact, they're barely people. The Red Ring literally burns out your heart and replaces it with rage plasma. You vomit acidic blood, and your thoughts become simple. Destroy what hurt you. Basically, Red Lanterns are weaponized anger with no off switch. So obviously, during Blackest Night, when Hal needed someone to infiltrate the Red Lanterns as a spy, someone angry enough to be accepted, willful enough to survive the transformation, and crazy enough to volunteer for having their heart burned out, Guy was the only option. Against all odds, the insane plan worked. Guy put on the Red Ring and maintained enough control to function. Sure, he was more aggressive and he vomited blood acid, but he stayed mentally present in ways that shocked even Atrocitus, the founder of the Red Lanterns. Guy Gardner was so naturally angry that becoming a Red Lantern was basically just amplifying what was already there. The power source that reduces everyone else to mindless berserkers? For Guy, it was just a Tuesday, but louder. It got so crazy, Guy eventually became the leader of the Red Lantern Corps. Yeah, the backup, the brain-damaged joke, led the most violent, feared Lantern Corps in the universe. And ironically, under his leadership, the Red Lanterns became better. Still angry, still violent, but with direction. Guy turned weaponized anger into controlled fury aimed at protecting the innocent. He'd finally found a place where his anger wasn't a character flaw. It was the qualification. Now, before you start smiling, we have to talk about Hal again. This moment destroys me every time. Emerald Twilight. Hal's home, Coast City, was obliterated. 7 million people died. Hal tried using his ring to bring them back. The Guardians stopped him. Hal snapped and became Parallax before going on a rampage through the Green Lantern Corps, killing dozens of lanterns. By the time Parallax Hal reaches Oa, only a handful of lanterns remain. They were outmatched. Hal has dozens of rings, amplified by grief and rage. The Guardians couldn't stop him, but Guy Gardner tried anyway. Guy, who'd been rejected by Hal's shadow his whole career. Guy, who everyone treated as lesser. Guy stood between Parallax and the Central Power Battery and said no. Not because he thought he could win. In fact, Guy knew exactly how this would go. But someone had to try. Someone had to slow Hal down long enough for the Guardians to evacuate, and for Ganthet to escape with the last power. Guy bought them that time. The fight was one-sided. Hal shattered Guy's constructs effortlessly, absorbed Guy's ring power until it went dead, left Guy floating in space, powerless, defeated. But Guy held Hal's attention long enough. The Guardians evacuated. The Corps could rebuild because Guy Gardner stood his ground, knowing he'd lose. This was when Guy proved everything. Not that he was better than Hal, but that was when everything was on the line. Guy Gardner would do the right thing anyway. His worth was about being the Lantern who never quit. Now you would think after all this, Guy would become the Green Lantern leader. Well, he tried. Guy's relationship with Hal seems simple. Hal's the real Green Lantern, the chosen one, while Guy's the angry pretender who resents being in second place. Except that's not fair. Remember, Guy and Hal were chosen simultaneously. The ring couldn't differentiate their worthiness, and Guy lost on geography. Then brain damage made him seem less capable, and in the end, he was benched repeatedly while Hal became famous. But see, what I didn't mention was when Guy formally challenged Hal for Corps leadership. Okay, stay with me on this one because it wasn't just ego. Guy had survived things Hal hadn't. He'd worn a yellow ring, led the Red Lanterns, and fought through brain injury and constant disrespect while still doing the job. So, yeah, the guy had a case. Hal's argument, on the other hand, was experience and track record. Guy's argument was that Hal kept making the same mistakes, which were going rogue and putting personal code above Guardian directives. And to be fair, Guy was spitting facts. I mean, Hal Jordan had literally become Parallax and nearly destroyed the universe. He'd killed Green Lanterns and tried to remake reality. Guy might be insane medically, but he has never gone that far off the rails. Even at his worst, Guy never betrayed the Corps. The challenge was intense, so much so that Guy and Hal fought across star systems, evenly matched in ways that shocked everyone. And remember, this was Guy, so no one expected the fight to be competitive. Hal won eventually, but the fight proved Guy's point. He was Hal's equal in raw ability. Guy Gardner was every bit as good as Hal Jordan. In fact, after the fight, Hal acknowledged it. But then, nothing changed. The status quo reasserted itself. But we weren't surprised. Guy proves himself repeatedly, and everyone just shrugs. Here's the twist. In the current DC continuity, Guy Gardner is thriving. And it's specifically because of everything that made him wrong for the role. After years of being the backup, Guy found his calling. He's become the Lantern who handles the jobs nobody else wants. The Dark Ops guy. The one they send when traditional methods won't work. Hal Jordan is the poster boy. John Stewart is the tactical commander. Kyle Rayner is the creative heart. Guy Gardner is the one they send when the mission requires someone willing to get his hands dirty. When diplomacy has failed. The Guardians, those same beings who treated Guy as a permanent backup, ended up preferring him for certain missions. Because Guy doesn't care about glory, doesn't need validation. He cares about getting the job done and protecting people. There's even a storyline where Guy is assigned to work with reformed supervillains as their liaison. Every other Lantern turned down the assignment, but Guy accepts immediately, and he's perfect for it. He doesn't judge them because he knows what it's like to be defined by your worst moments. He doesn't take their disrespect personally. He sets clear boundaries, backs them up with force when necessary, and slowly earns their respect in ways other Lanterns never could. This is what makes Guy the wildest Green Lantern. He took every single thing that should have destroyed him, the rejection, the brain damage, the humiliation, the failures, and turned it into armor, into an identity that makes him uniquely valuable in ways the quote-unquote better Lanterns aren't. Every time the universe said, "You don't belong here," Guy Gardner said, "Watch me," and proved his worth in new ways. With that said, what's your favorite Guy Gardner moment? Drop your comments below, and while you are at it, why not save our universe by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video to stay up to date with even more deep dives into underrated heroes?